My parents, who refused to pay for my college, now want me to loan them some money. So I, a 34-year-old male, am a software developer. Compared to the rest of my family, I make a lot more money than they do. My mother is a retired music teacher, and my dad runs the local hardware store. I also have a younger sister, Catherine, 30, and I haven't been in touch with her for the past 5 years. It's mostly because she's a horrible person and is really spoiled and entitled. 5 years ago, Catherine brought her new boyfriend to Christmas dinner, which I was hosting. I had just moved into a new apartment and wanted to do something special, but Catherine ruined it by making rude remarks about my home and bragging about her wealthy boyfriend. I told her that I was paying for my apartment on my own, unlike her and her boyfriend who relied on our parents. I asked her to leave if she had such high standards, and she did. Since then, we haven't spoken, despite my parents' efforts to reconcile us. Recently, I found out that Catherine is engaged to the same boyfriend, and they are getting married in a couple of months. My parents insisted on covering the cost of the wedding venue and decor to avoid being outdone by the groom's parents, which I thought was foolish. They should have known Catherine's expensive taste would be beyond their budget. Eventually, they realized they couldn't afford it and came to me for a loan. Despite our good relationship in recent years, I declined because of something that happened years ago. When I was about to graduate high school, my parents told me they wouldn't cover my college tuition or expenses. They wanted me to be independent like they were at my age. This was surprising since they had always been supportive. They hadn't saved any money for my sister and me. They wanted us to work through college like they did. My course was difficult, and I didn't want to work alongside college, fearing it would affect my grades. College is expensive, and working wouldn't be enough, so I suggested taking out a student loan. My parents weren't fine with taking out a student loan for my college education. When I suggested borrowing money from relatives and returning it later, they found it insulting. They said it was against their principles to borrow money because it was pathetic. I fought with them a lot over this, but in the end, I managed to get my grandparents to help me take out a student loan, which is how I made it through college. I was very mad at my parents back then, but eventually, I forgave them, although I never forgot. My sister never had this problem because she didn't go to college. She always planned to take over Dad's business or get married, and that's exactly what she's doing. The bottom line is that I remember what my parents said about borrowing money when I suggested a loan for my education. They refused because it was against their principles. Now, with Catherine wanting a grand wedding, they've conveniently forgotten those principles. I wasn't going to let this slide because they had caused a lot of inconvenience for me back then. I don't think my sister's wedding is more important than my college education. When they asked me for help, I reminded them of their stance on loans and borrowing money. They were dumbfounded because they didn't expect me to remember this after so many years. But I did, and I remembered it well. After our conversation, they had nothing to say and went home quietly. I thought that was the end of it. But then a bunch of relatives started contacting me saying I had humiliated my parents. My parents were telling everyone that I had changed after coming into money and was holding it over their heads, trying to put them down despite everything they had done for me. I didn't think that was accurate at all. I was just standing up against something I thought was unfair. So, I ended up not speaking to my parents. If they had a problem with what I said, they should have confronted me directly instead of whining to the rest of the family. I also didn't speak to the rest of the family because if they didn't understand where I was coming from, I had nothing more to say to them. I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding, so I didn't see why I needed to contribute in any way. For the past couple of days, I've had no contact with my parents or anyone else from the family, and I've been pretty happy about it. I don't think I've done anything wrong. But 2 days ago, my parents visited me, very upset. They told me they had been uninvited from my sister's wedding because they couldn't fund it and had asked Catherine and her in-laws for financial help. Catherine lost her mind, pressing them to arrange the money somehow, because going to her in-laws at this stage would make her family look bad. My parents shouldn't have committed to covering my sister's wedding costs if they weren't sure they could afford it. While Catherine is usually spoiled and entitled, she wasn't wrong to be upset about this. I think she and her fiancé should have paid for the wedding themselves given his family's wealth, but if my parents promised something, they should have followed through. Catherine was right that they made her look bad in front of her in-laws. When my parents came to me for money, I reminded them that they had refused to take out a loan for my college education because it was against their principles. Now, they conveniently forgot those principles for Catherine's wedding. I told them they brought this on themselves and had no one else to blame. Uninviting them from the wedding was an overreaction, but what did they expect from Catherine? She's always been like this, and they enabled her behavior. My parents insisted that if I had just helped them out, they wouldn't be in this predicament. I thought it was unfair for them to blame me and told them to leave. They did, But then the entire family turned against me, accusing me of being selfish and heartless. Personally, I don't think I did anything wrong. So, Aita for refusing to contribute to my sister's wedding because my parents can't afford it? Update 1. I've decided to go with no contact with my entire family. Both my dad's and mom's sides are united against me, except for my grandparents. My mom's parents are no longer around, but my dad's parents are on my side and trying to keep the peace. Even they're getting tired of the drama. The family's hatred toward me has brought them together, which is ironic. I'm glad I was able to do something good for the family, but I've blocked them all and don't want any more drama. Someone in the comments suggested that the real reason everyone hates me is jealousy, and I think that's valid. I'm doing a lot better than most of my family, and they can't stand it. I didn't take anyone's advice growing up. Most of them told me to get a business degree and take over my dad's store instead of constantly being on the computer. Now, I'm successful, and they resent me for it. Families should be happy for each other's successes, but that's never been the case for me. And it makes me sad. My parents are probably enjoying the fact that everyone is against me, blaming me for getting them uninvited from my sister's wedding. My grandparents told me they aren't speaking to my parents either. My grandparents have helped them out so many times, yet my parents don't remember any of that. It makes me happy that I didn't help them out because they would have conveniently forgotten about it in the future. They take everything for granted, and it's time someone taught them a lesson, even if it has to be Catherine. Update 2. Something funny happened yesterday. I was busy, but when I got home, Catherine visited me. I was surprised since we hadn't spoken in 5 years and didn't have a good relationship. I assumed she was here about her wedding, needing money now that our parents weren't invited. But she started by apologizing for everything she had done in the past. She said she was about to start a new chapter in her life, getting married, and wanted to formally invite me to make up for her past behavior. She claimed to regret being a brat, but blamed our parents for never correcting her. She said she wanted to make amends, starting with me because I had put up with her the most. I let her talk and told her I was glad she had come to her senses and apologized, but I knew there was more to come, and I waited patiently. She then said she knew our parents had been horrible to me too. She had heard from relatives that they were calling me selfish, heartless, and petty for refusing to contribute to her wedding. She tried to suck up to me, saying I was right because our parents never helped me after I turned 18, and they were the ones who promised to pay for her wedding. It wasn't my responsibility to bail them out, especially given our poor relationship. I was waiting for Catherine to get to the point, and eventually she did. She told me that since our parents were uninvited from her wedding, they had withdrawn their promised funds. She was too embarrassed to tell her fiancé that his parents would now cover everything. She asked me to help her financially, promising to repay me by the end of the year. I found her offer to sign a contract interesting, but told her I needed time to think. Despite her apology, our relationship was still strained. I knew she was just after money, not genuinely apologetic. I told her she was as selfish as our parents. Catherine got angry, yelled at me, and threatened to call the cops. I told her to leave, and when she refused, I forced her out. She eventually left, and though I was upset for a while, I now find it a funny incident. Update 3. Weeks later, I received an unexpected invitation to Catherine's wedding. Confused, I contacted her. She called back, curt but clear. She was genuinely trying to be better and had managed the wedding expenses herself. She said she hadn't actually uninvited our parents. They had withdrawn themselves after she criticized them for not being realistic about their financial commitment. She was angry with them for failing to follow through, leading them to believe she didn't want them there. Instead of addressing the issue directly with her, they talked to others about it. Catherine admitted that the rest of the family hadn't turned against her like they had against me, but she was still considering whether to invite them. My theory is that since my grandparents won't support my parents anymore, they need Catherine's support. Despite my past grievances, I'm willing to give Catherine a chance if she's genuinely changed. I discussed it with my grandparents, who agreed to attend if I did. Update 4. Yesterday, I walked Catherine down the aisle at her wedding. Our parents didn't apologize or attend, so Catherine asked me for support. I agreed because no one deserves to be mistreated by their parents over such matters. Seeing my parents' unwillingness to reconcile with their favored child was disheartening. They failed as parents by never correcting Catherine's behavior, contributing to her past issues. Catherine was thankful for my support, especially since even the few family members she invited had declined. Her fiancé covered the wedding expenses after Catherine explained the situation. Despite the absence of our parents, we reassured Catherine not to let them ruin her day. Things aren't perfect, but we're trying to improve our relationship. I believe Catherine's apology was sincere, and I hope we can move forward. Some may disagree with my choice, but I think it's the right decision.